bear that in mind. I'm not going to go into too much more detail on that announcement, but the first item on the agenda is apologies for absence. We now have an apologies from Councillor Watkins, and I think Councillor Dixon is subbing, and Councillor Highsleeve and Councillor Stock was due to be subbing for Councillor Whittaker, but Haley, you've now joined us, which is good news. In terms of declarations of interest, anybody got any declarations of interest that they need to make us aware of on any item on the agenda? Appears not. Okay, thank you very much. Public open session, unless I'm much mistaken, I can't see that we've got any, and we've got 3 attendees. So we've got you and Shirley to get and Tracy Stock. Any of our members wish to, public members wish to ask any questions or make any participation? Raise your hand, please. Appears not. Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda then, which is the chairman's announcements. I've got one item in relation to the terms of reference of the committee, and essentially I'm going to read this in some terms, so please bear with me. But essentially, the minutes and action log for the Town Joint Committee will be presented to both the Town and Council and to Central Beds Council. The detail of where this will be presented will be determined by both councils and reported back to the Town Joint Committee. So essentially, the process for joint committees is that we can use the existing process for requesting specific items. The CBC Joint Committee or CBC Joint Chair or Vice Chair would then need to request the item to the Monitoring Officer. The Monitoring Officer will then need to ensure that the item is added to the relevant agenda, overview and scrutiny agenda for consideration by the relevant committee. We then, as a member, can then attend the meeting and explain the reasons for the request, and the committee can then decide to either resolve, request, office to prepare a report, set up a task and finish group, or make recommendations to council, or decide to take no further action upon the request. So this is in relation to items that we would like further consideration on. So what I'll do, I'll share that announcement, because I realise that's probably a little bit garbled, but I'll share that to you so that you have a clear idea of what that refers to. But essentially, in items that we want to take forward to committee. Other than that, so nothing else to add. We're going to move on to the minutes of the previous meeting. So in terms of the meeting dated the 21st of January, any items, any issues on page 1, so page 4 on the minutes, page 2 or page 5, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6. Madeline.
We went through things rather quickly, but on page 6 of our agenda pack, we refer to Housing England, and I think it should be Homes England, shouldn't it?
Yes.
If we could put that right, please.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Further down, the second paragraph from the bottom, it says Home and Spring Farms, and it's New Spring Farm.
Okay. Charlie, you're going to pick these up as well?
Yes, I made a note of that already.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And then we seem to have some duplication on my set of papers where we go back to earlier on in the minutes and go through them again. So we have, where is it from? From Head of Place Delivery Ingrid through to the community grants seems to be twice in my minutes for some reason.
Okay. We'll review those then, Madeline. Just make sure those bits are taken out. Thank you.
Thank you.
So where do we get up to then? Page. So I'm on page 9. So page 6 of the minutes. Anything on there? No. Page 7. And page 8. So nothing else then. Anybody? Madeline, go ahead.
I'm sorry to be a nuisance, but under the neighbourhood plan report on what's page 11 of the pack, the top sentence doesn't make sense, but what I was trying to refer to was a map of the scheduled monuments in Biggleswade, in the parish of Biggleswade, and to say that 3 further monuments have been scheduled in January of this year. So they've just been scheduled at the last meeting, and that will have an impact on where growth can be in Biggleswade. So it should be maps of scheduled monuments to show the 3 further scheduled monuments that have just been scheduled by Historic England, if that makes sense.
So could you just remind me, Madam, where that is on the agenda? What page? Sorry.
It's page 11 of the pack, and it's the top sentence on the page. Yeah.
Yes, I see. Okay, Sean, you've got that, yeah? Perfect. Okay. So thank you for that. So the next item on the agenda actually is, I know we're going quite quickly, but the next item is the key infrastructure projects. Kate, welcome to our meeting. You're going to go through the Oxford and Cambridge ARC, Housing Infrastructure Fund, and the Garden Community Strategic Housing Sites, I understand.
Yes, thank you very much. So thank you for having me. I haven't been to a Biggleswade Joint Committee for a while, so it's nice to be here and nice to see some familiar and new faces. If I start with the Oxford to Cambridge ARC, I suppose the headline messages that many of you will know, but if you don't, just to be clear, is that there were a series of government announcements throughout February and March, re-emphasising and restating the importance and the significance of the ARC, and particularly focusing on 2 key things, I suppose, in those statements. And one was around the proposal for a spatial framework. I'm just looking at exactly how it was described, but talking about a spatial framework that's planning for sustainable growth in the Oxford-Cambridge ARC. If you haven't seen that, I can certainly send you the link to the documents, but that gives a sense of the principles behind the spatial framework, an indication of timelines, and recognising that the spatial framework has to take into account economy, environment, infrastructure, and obviously homes. I have nothing further that I can add in terms of what next beyond that government announcement. It does talk about consultation over summer 2021 and moving forwards. We are waiting for further announcements actually from MHCLG. So coming out of the PERDA period, what we're expecting are a series of announcements, probably kind of middle end of May, are the indications that we've been given in terms of how that spatial framework will be taken forward, what it looks like, and what's the time frame, and critically how stakeholders feed into that. So it's very much a bit of a wait and see, and we hope that expecting more to come out next month. So I suppose then the second kind of area that came out in February and March was around the exploring, I think is the word that was used in some of the government releases, but it's around the creation of an ARC growth body that would be made up of representatives from a broad and diverse group of kind of local authorities, businesses, and other interested parties. And again, linking in and very much being looking at a business-led chair. As I said previously, in PERDA, waiting to come out of that and then hear more about how the ARC growth body could look, shape, feel, operate. So stepping back kind of from some of those announcements, I suppose it's just to reiterate, and apologies if you've covered this in previous meetings, but just to really reiterate that in terms of the focus of the ARC moving forward, it's really structured and focusing on kind of place making, place shaping, the type of area the Ark wants to be in the future. Secondly, then around kind of infrastructure and connectivity, particularly thinking about the infrastructure and the connectivity of the future. The third area around productivity and jobs, employment sectors, those kind of growth areas, and taking forward the ARC economic prospectus. And then the fourth is around the environment, protecting and enhancing the environment. So those are the four kind of key focal points within the ARC. And I guess, you know, in the context of the ARC and that infrastructure, obviously one of the big things that's taking place at the moment is the East-West Rail Consultation, which you will all be aware of, that you can look at online, interactive maps, and that runs until the beginning of June, 9th of June, I believe. So that was probably my canter through the high level at the ARC. I have fed back to colleagues that actually this item was, you know, on the agenda. So this is colleagues at the LEP, Local Enterprise Partnership, and also BEIS and MHCLG, that, you know, this item is on the joint committee. And I think that gives a sense of, you know, there is interest in the ARC and trying to understand what's coming next, really, in terms of the spatial framework and the time frames and how people feed in. So I have fed that back up. So I think that's what I was going to cover. You know, happy to take questions. I'm certainly not an ARC expert in any way, shape or form, but happy to take any comments or questions.
Anyone wish to comment or ask any questions? It appears not, Kate, on this one. So I guess we're looking forward to seeing what happens, but for the time being, nothing further. So thank you for that. I'll leave you on to the next one then.
So I probably just need to quickly check back what I should be covering in what order.
HIF,
go back up.
Please. HIF
next. Right. So in terms of the Housing Infrastructure Fund, obviously you have received some updates on this in previous meetings. So I suppose that kind of the headline messages very much around, you know, the funding has been confirmed. We're moving into a phase of significant amounts of activity with projects and interdependencies. So what will sit behind that is clearly a need for public engagement and consultation in a coordinated way. In terms of the HIF programme, as you'll be aware, there are kind of 5 elements, I guess, and 4 projects. The kind of the first element is it is linked to the delivery of homes, as was captured in the minutes from the last meeting. But in terms of the kind of the 4 substantive projects, if I start with the school, because you had a colleague of mine talking at the last meeting. In terms of the school, I think the headline message that I would just want to share there is, I believe the update at the last joint committee talked about consultation starting in April. That isn't the case now. It has moved back an executive, a Central Bedfordshire Council executive cycle, and is currently scheduled to go to the June executive. So the consultation period will equally have moved back. But everything else, I think, as was discussed at the last meeting in terms of undertaking the consultation, hearing the views to inform the way forward, that all stands, but it's the timescale that's moved. So I think the second project, in no particular order really, but in terms of the transport interchange, I'm aware that's one that has certainly been discussed by many colleagues on this call, feeding into workshops. That's obviously resulted in the planning application being submitted. I'm also aware there are some points of perhaps further discussion. I think there are some lessons that we've taken away actually from the transport interchange, just in terms of ensuring that we are, engaging as early as we can. So certainly just trying to take that one away as we move forward with the programme. In terms of the substation, again with the substation, updates previously have talked about, the need for that residential and commercial growth will require this increased power capacity. At the moment, work is ongoing, so this is very much led by UKPN and National Grid around concept designs and what that would look like. So what we will be looking at is some kind, engagement really looking to take place over the summer. But what we would very much like to do is to work with yourselves, particularly colleagues at the Town Council, to work through kind of some of the best ways of undertaking that engagement. It's certainly not going to be me leading that engagement. It will be, with UKPN and National Grid and their experts getting involved in that and leading that engagement to enable some of those conversations. But I expect we would be wanting to, and however you want us to play this in, be wanting to come and talk to yourselves in the Town Council, probably middle of May, about how we could structure some of that engagement, recognising it's going to be a really important part. And then with Lindsell's the Lindsell's Crossing, the bridleway, again, work is underway there in terms of bringing that forward and looking at how we would be wanting to engage and consult on that. But again, that will be over the coming weeks and months. We'll be wanting to have conversations with you about how we take that forward. So that's probably a bit of my canter through the Housing Infrastructure Fund programme. Clearly there is a lot going on. We're still in the early stages, so it's kind of gearing up, I guess. But what we are absolutely recognising is the need to better coordinate our briefings and our engagement. So I can kind of absolutely assure you that is a priority for us. We might not be going as fast as you may like, but we are putting a lot of focus into pulling it together so we can have a more coherent conversation and keep that going as early as we can. So kind of happy to take comments, questions, thoughts, concerns, anything else.
Okay, thank you. Members, any comments, questions, thoughts? Madeline.
I just want to thank Kate for acknowledging that it would be a good idea to talk to people in the town, both ward councillors and town councillors, about these projects as early as possible. We don't need to go into what's happened with the transport interchange, but the acknowledgement, Kate, is very welcome. Thank you very much.
Hazel.
I just would like to ask Kate, if you don't mind, you said about the consultation with schools, and it's been now deferred until, well, now put in June. Have you any idea how long that consultation will last? Is it going to go through the school holidays, or any idea when?
So I haven't got definitive dates of when it would start and finish. My understanding, and Councillor Dixon may want to come in on this one, but it's my understanding is as soon as the executive decision is made, the consultation would start as quickly as it could. So certainly trying to commence it with a significant gap or a significant period before the school holidays. But I'll let Councillor Dixon come in, who's probably been in some meetings this week that may have updated that.
Right, thank you very much.
No, I haven't. But Hazel, I'm going to hesitate to guess it's between 8 and 12 weeks consultation. it's not a short, sharp one. It will be a full consultation as per the guidelines that are given to us. I'm going to hesitate, but I think it's 12 weeks.
That's 3 months. So yeah, okay. So you're talking about the new school year and in between then and Christmas, possibly. That sort of time.
I mean, I without getting into specifics, I think the impact we've had on COVID because people have been so distracted.
Yes.
It's
yes.
the same old argument, isn't it, about you consult over the summer holidays. Well, some people say, yes, I've got the time. Other people say, no, I'm on holiday. Rock and a hard place. But I think I will find out, and I'll come back via some of you to let you know for definite.
Right. Thank you very much.
Hayley?
Thank you, Mark. My understanding, and I might be wrong, so Councillor Dixon, feel free to correct me if you find out differently, is it's 12 weeks and it's due to commence at some point after the 8th of June exec.
Yep.
It would go to the June exec for approval to go out to have your say, so that sort of process.
Yeah.
I think it's probably important to recognise that it's not just specifically linked to the HIF, but it obviously is the whole schools for the future element, and the school is part of that. So and that the impact, but sort of the effect on Biggleswade is I guess quite significant, which is why you've got the 12-week consultation. I think that some of us may have some idea about what's going on, but not really the exact detail. The schools have been consulted in some way, but not formally. So we've got a public consultation, which, assuming that goes to exec on the 8th, and this one has actually been put back a number of times, hasn't it? But I think that the 8th is the latest date it can really go. But essentially after that, then it goes public, and all of the feedback can come forward. And there's clearly some conversations out there and some feedback out there that needs to come forward. So, Hayley.
Just to come back on that and say that one of the things that I've raised already at Central Beds is we are in real danger here of consultation apathy, because we are consulting on a lot of projects, one after the other, and in some cases they're overlapping, and there has to be obvious evidence that we're listening to what we're being told. So I think that's really important, but also making sure that we coordinate our consultations. So I know, for example, you have the neighbourhood plan, making sure that that's coordinated with Central Beds, I think will be really useful, because otherwise we're all going to get very few responses and it's not really going to represent our residents' views.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else got any comments, feedback in relation to HIF? Appears not. Okay. So the next one, Kate, is the garden communities and strategic housing, please.
Okay, thank you. So again, on the garden communities, there have been some updates on this, haven't there previously? So there is we've received £150,000 worth of funding. Project board is obviously up and running with representation from a range of partners, including CBC and the town council. I understand that there have been a series of briefings recently, and partway through some of those briefings and more conversations that are taking place. But I guess in a similar vein to what we've just talked about, there are some areas that have been identified that particularly the Garden Communities project should be focusing in around thinking about kind of sustainable transport corridor, and what elements that could look like, or where it could go. But really the next step is a discussion and thinking about potentially the engagement and the appetite for undertaking that. So we're at that phase of, there's been some early work, but it's kind of just working through the next steps and the timing of that engagement, particularly taking into account everything else that's going on and how some of it links up. So I think that's where we're at on that particular piece of work, and I understand that there are some further conversations taking place next week, which will help to shape some of that.
Okay. Any questions? Or thank you, Kate. Any questions on that? Madeline?
Sorry to come back again, but there has been something of a reluctance to share what's been going on. And I know that we now have our town clerk on the project board, but I think the sustainable transport corridor is very important. We're very much looking forward to hearing a bit more about it, and we've asked that it be an item on the town council agenda, because it's absolutely key, the east-west connectivity in Biggleswade, to making the town work in the future. And I think you understand that, Kate, as much as anybody. So I do think we need to have as much conversation as possible between the board and the town. And I also look forward, again, I suspect after PERDA, of finding out whether we've got a second tranche of money from the government to help with the all the exploration that needs to happen, and looking at all the possibilities and all the things that may or may not limit the garden community. So I look forward to hearing about that after the May elections. Thank you.
If I may just come back on that, yes, you are correct. We are waiting for that post-PERDA period to hear about any new announcements, yes.
Okay. Anybody else want to ask a question? Any feedback on that? Nope. And I would just comment on the sustainable transport corridor. I guess it's something as the earliest opportunity that we can share it, but I appreciate there's some background stuff we need to do in advance before that can become to town council, I imagine. Okay, in which case, if there's nothing else on this particular subject, then thank you very much, Kate, for that one. You've got the town centre economy and shortly. Madeline, you're going to give us an update on the neighbourhood plan now, please.
Yes, I'd like to say two things. First of all, I do object to it being on the agenda that I will attend to update. No, I'm a member of this joint committee. And I did say at the, oh, sorry about my clock. I did say at the last meeting that I thought it would be more appropriate now for Peter to be updating on the neighbourhood plan as an officer rather than me. I haven't spoken to Peter about this. There's been quite a lot going on in the last few days. But if I just say one or two things about the neighbourhood plan, I hope, Peter, if you want to come in and say other things, you will, because in future it really should be your update to the committee rather than mine. But I think the important thing to say at the moment is that we're in the middle of a public engagement. And has been mentioned, yes, it's another public engagement. We have had a pretty good response so far. There's a survey, monkey survey, that's been put together for us by BRCC, and they are running it and will come back to us with the analysis, and that will feed into a first draft of the actual plan. And the other important thing I just wanted to talk about was we have a council meeting, an extra one, on Tuesday evening, and one of the major items on that agenda, there'll be two, but one of them is the neighbourhood plan. And our consultant, who will actually be writing the plan, Dave Chetwin from Urban Vision Enterprise, and our project manager, John Baldwin, who is a planner, will both be speaking at that meeting. And we're starting to gear up now. This is really moving forward. And if people are interested in the neighbourhood plan, then I would suggest that you look in on that meeting. And of course, as all our meetings now, it will be on YouTube afterwards. So, Peter, I don't know whether you'd like to give more detail on what I've just said.
I think the first thing to say is just to reinforce what you've been saying, Madeline, in regard to the number of responses that we're getting. We were cognizant of COVID and a kind of coming out of COVID, that there might not be the volume there, but we're very surprised to see that there is the volume there. And our community is engaging with us, and the volume is high, which bodes well for the end of the consultation period. So very happy with that. Also, I wanted to reinforce that we're very much online in regard to meeting the timescales. We're very confident about delivering now. The work that we're doing with John and with Dave is going very well. And you know, the status reports that we regularly look at indicate that we will be on time. So a very, very strong positive message in regard to Biggleswade's neighbourhood plan.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Any comments, questions from anyone else in relation to this? Appears not. Again, as Madeline says, obviously join the meeting on Tuesday to get a further update if that's helpful for Steve.
Sorry, I'm a bit late to that one. Can I just ask, are you confining the consultation to the four walls of Biggleswade, as it were? As you know, I'm the ward member for next door in Langford, and Langford very much faces Biggleswade, sees it as its natural go-to place. And I just wondered, is it literally within the four walls, or how might you receive an approach from us lot down south?
You'd be very welcome, Steve. I can say that. It's on the town council website. There's a link on the website. There's other publicity around in the town, but any comments from neighbours are welcome, in the same way that we've been really pleased to be able to comment as a council on the Langford neighbourhood plan as it's gone through its formal consultation, and also our other neighbours, Sutton. So yes, we very much need to work together. And if you've got any comments from Langford and Arlesey and Henlow and beyond, please do go online.
Well, your comments on the Langford one was what prompted the question, so thank you. I will encourage them and others.
Would it be helpful, Councillor Dixon, if I were to send you a link so that you could see the consultation taking place?
You obviously understand my ability with technology, Peter, all too well, so that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Will do.
Okay, on that note, if there's nothing further on this particular subject, thank you, Madeline. Kate, it's back over to you for the update on major employment sites, please.
Okay, thank you. I was just flicking back actually to the minutes from the last meeting, and I think quite a few things were covered there. I suppose the local plan, as you'll be aware, the major modifications are currently out for consultation, and I can't remember the timescale for that. I think it's the 5th of May. So it's that will be on your radar, I am sure. Have a look at that on the Central Bedfordshire Council website. In terms of Home Farm, there are obviously some allocation there and proposals and some changes there, which I think were probably talked about at the last session, in terms of the council proposing to allocate 25 hectares of the land for general employment uses as opposed to strategic warehousing. So I think that will be on your radar. Other kind of news is Lidl on Stratton Business Park, and that continues to move forward. But again, I think that was reported at the last committee. The Stratton Industrial Park LDO at the last committee was talked about just being on pause. That's still the case, and is primarily because of linking it into the council's new economic strategy, which was adopted earlier this year. So we'll be looking at how that is taken forward in line with the economic strategy and the priorities within the economic strategy. So that work will start most likely over summer. So certainly happy to bring back updates on that. They're probably the headlines that I've got. It's fairly similar, I think, to what you heard last time, because there's not always major shifts that quickly between some of these big employment sites.
Okay. Any questions? Any feedback? Anything, Madeline?
Sorry, I'm going to get on my high horse again over what might be happening with the employment sites either side of the A1. Yes, you're right, Kate, it was discussed at the last meeting, and we have New Spring Farm, which has been looked at by Central Beds and we know is going to come forward as soon as there's a partial review. So we're looking at extension of Stratton Business Park, Home Farm and New Spring Farm, and that's a huge amount of economic development land in Biggleswade. We are looking at the home farm as part of the main modifications. And an interesting thing that I'll say straight away is that at the examination in public, we were promised 2 bridle bridges, one over the A1 and one over the railway at the nearby level crossing. And somehow the second one at the level crossing seems to have been missed out of the main modifications. So I think the Town Council will certainly be bringing that up, because both are quite important for our green wheel. And since most of Biggleswade will be built on once the local plan goes through, we do very much need that green wheel and for it to be a proper green wheel. We know that New Spring Farm will come forward. So the other big issue for the town is tree belts to hide the warehousing, to put it in simple terms, because coming down from Topless Hill, it's not going to be a very nice entry into Biggleswade. So the main modifications do say that there should be a large area of planting to the south of Home Farm, but there's no indication of planting along the actual edge of the A1. And that's something that we're going to be pushing for as a town council. And it's something that the inspectors were certainly keen on when this first came up at the original examination in, I think it was July 19. And the final issue is the number of shuttle buses and how that might work, and the fact that I think I certainly have some doubts about how many people will actually come to work at Home Farm by train and therefore need a direct shuttle bus from the train. But what we talked about at the examination in public was that the shuttle bus, there should be certainly more than one shuttle bus operating at any one time, and that it should go around the major housing estates in the town, because we're going to have a vastly increasing population and we want those people to work locally. And it's not very easy to get to Home Farm across the A1. So therefore a shuttle bus that makes it a lot easier for Biggleswade residents to get to employment in Home Farm is what we really need. We do have the possibility of walking and cycling under the A1 at Windermere Drive. And there is also a promise in the main modifications that that bridleway will be suitably surfaced and lit. But we do need, I think, the shuttle bus as well. So I'll get off my high horse now, but I'm very much into all of this at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Madeline. Anybody else got any comments, feedback? I see no other hands. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you very much for that. We'll move on from that. Thanks for your contribution. Paul, it's over to you now. So an update on highways projects in Biggleswade then, please. Thank you.
Okay, so the annual plan has been submitted and ward members, CBC ward members have been briefed on what is going on in Biggleswade, but I'll just run through the headline ones. I think I ran through them last time, but I'll just reiterate them. So in the Biggleswade South Ward, we've got Swanbourne Close being resurfaced, Broadmead footway being resurfaced. We've got a section of the right of way off Hitchin Street, installation of 3 lighting columns there. So that's from Hitchin Street to the footbridge over the railway. So that's being lit. There are Orchard Close junction with Hitchmead. There's some junction improvements, new crossing and double yellow lines going in around there. Eagle Farm Road is having an outline design for footpath improvements. And then speed reduction near John of Gaunt area is going for outline design as well. And then in the north, we've got Drove Road, carriageway resurfacing, Sun Street, carriageway resurfacing, Nursery Close, footway resurfacing. Lawrence Road is a drainage and section 106 junction realignment and drainage issues design with construction later in the year, and Potton Road crossing. And I think that's it with regards to those. So I'll just give you an up-to-date thing. Potton Road was out for consultation. That closed. The design now is ongoing with a due completion date of the design of the 16th of July 2021, with construction to follow in the summer straight after. London Road consultation with regards to the active travel scheme has closed now, so that's being assessed. Lilac Grove double yellow lines, consultations ongoing on that till the 30th of April. Fairfield Road double yellow lines, consultations ongoing with that one until the 30th of April. I think there's, and correct me if I'm wrong, the town centre decluttering, I think there's some snagging still to be done in and around there. Traffic signals, I gave a bit of a brief update last time. We are still looking to deliver some traffic signals replacements with Luton. We've got a meeting with them on Monday, so that is to define the programme. Also, some of you may or may not have seen, the DFT are put out a bid, a challenge bid for any additional funds or challenge funds for signals. So we are working with Luton to tap into that where possible. So that may affect or may benefit Biggleswade with regards to getting any further signals replaced. We did upgrade the signals at the Rose Lane junction as a result of them being hit by a vehicle. So whilst they were being replaced, we actually upgraded them. So that was a sort of a bit of a blessing in disguise. Another item on the previous minutes was e-scooters. We've got no update on that at the moment with regards to trials, but there's a further meeting, I think it's next week, that I'm attending, just to look at potential corridors to trial that. A request has gone out for feedback on charging points as part of the sustainability plan. So any feedback on that would be welcome. Ringway Jacobs have provided support on the temperamental signals at the Saxon Drive development. So for those of you that have driven around there, and I do it regularly, they have been very problematic. So I've noted on many occasions that Ringway Jacobs have been out there hand signalling to enable traffic to flow. Our streetworks team are onto the developer to ensure that they are being dealt with accordingly. Fix My Street is obviously live. It's still being refined. There's still some tweaks that we're working on that. So again, the call is to if there's anything you find that's a bit erroneous on there, then please contact Jack Bowers in CBC with any feedback. That will be gratefully received. My team, myself, are working on providing some members any sort of feedback and further information on certain roads of concern. I know, Hayley, I'm still working on your request, so please bear with me. But yeah, if there are areas of concerns and roads, I can provide a little bit more context as to what their condition's showing and where they're likely to be in the programme. There's still ongoing work with the adoption process on King's Reach and also on Stratton Business Park. So we're in constant dialogue with Isaac Mercer and the consortium on King's Reach, trying to resolve some of the issues there. Stratton Business Park, we've walked through the phase down the side of Halfords, and there's the snagging has been completed there. We also walked down the phase 5 bit, which is towards where the new co-op distribution centre is, and working in conjunction with our assets team. So as and when that gets adopted, it's all meets the requirements of highways. And then lastly, the team are working on producing a Section 38 document. That's to give members an overview and an understanding of how the adoption process works, what's included in it, and a bit of sort of layman's terminology or layman's terms as to some of the specific technical elements of that. So just understanding the terms of bonds, commuted sums, maintenance periods, etc. So it's just to understand and give a bit of context, because I think there's some ambiguity as to what that all means and how the process actually works. So once that's done, that will probably become a live document, so you guys will be able to see it as well. Apologies, that's quite a whistle-stop tour of highways. So if there's any questions, feel free.
Go ahead, Hayley.
Thank you. Paul's probably sick of hearing from me. A couple of things, Paul. Road markings, we do have a bit of an issue with, and I have chatted with some highways colleagues in the last couple of weeks about this, but I don't know if we can help to move it forward. So we've got some of the mini roundabouts in the town centre, particularly the one down near Shortmead Street. It's virtually disappeared, and I have asked repeatedly for it to be redone, and I know there's an issue with road markings, but if we can try and get particularly that one done, it's very prominent in the town, and it is just non-existent. Then there's another one down by Halfords that's also disappeared. We were thinking we might be able to get that done under the works that were planned for that area, but again, it's probably worth just keeping an eye on that, because again, that's completely gone, and you've got lots of really big trucks going down there now, so it's important, I think, that there's some road markings there. And then my other question was around the area around Novello Drive, because the plan was, I understand, that they were going to do the final surface on there, and they'd raised all the ironworks. And my understanding is the consortium have now decided not to do that, and they're now going back and lowering all the ironworks, and they're not going to do the final resurface. And the residents there are aghast that they've been living there for 6 years and still don't have a final surface, because it does have a huge impact on them getting access on and off their driveways, and actually just going around corners, because I'm sure you've been there, it's not a nice surface. I don't think we have a huge amount of influence over this, but given the amount of time that's passed, do we have any regulations about how long they can wait before they have to put a final road surface in?
No, in simple answers, because it's an unadopted highway, so it's in effect private land which they're allowing access over to all the residents and the users of those facilities and amenities within that area. So we don't have, as far as I'm concerned, and I will double check with the relevant people, I don't think we've got any say that they should be topping it off anytime soon. It's their discretion of when and how they do it. It is, I totally agree, it is extremely frustrating, and personally, well, hence why they're lowering the ironwork. I think it's quite hazardous at the moment as it stands. That's just my personal opinion, but we will. I don't know why they've decided to pull the surfacing. It's crazy to me, but I will ask the question and see if we can push them to get it topped off.
That would be great, thank you.
Well, just a second, Hazel. Sorry if you don't mind. Just on the same subject, it just seems a bit odd, doesn't it, that you've got access from the other end of the development now. So there's no reason why this part of it couldn't be done, because you can access from the other end. So what the developer's thinking is be interesting to know whether they're working on that area. But the fact that residents have had to put up with this is just not good enough, really. But and I know. Obviously, we've spoken previously around desire lines and my semi-obsession with desire lines, but also particularly around the particular concerns around dropped curbs and where those are in place. Communication recently with a resident on the new part of King's Reach around the play area where there is no drop curb. I'm just really concerned that we make sure that we look at all of those things, and we're going to have a sort of a walk around just to make sure we can see where those issues are. So I think if we can book that in, but really any future developments really need to consider the pinch points for pedestrians, for parents, and for people that are using wheelchairs. I mean, there are some really tight areas that essentially residents either have to walk on the road or cross, but there are no drop curbs. So I think it's important to recognise that and do something about it, certainly at developments going forward if we can, but particularly prior to adoption, dealing with these as well if we can. Sorry, Hazel,
That's okay.
Just to come back on that, I totally agree. And as been mentioned before, we've probably done a quite a detailed walk around about 3/4 of Kings Reach. The area that we haven't done is, well, 2 parts we haven't done is the new bit that's just opened up towards the Potton end, and the area around the Velo Drive, Macmillan Grove, and that area, which is the other area we haven't done. We actually had a very constructive meeting with Isaac Mercer, who is the representative of the consortium, and Martin Grant Holmes. It was specifically around Maunder Avenue and the issues there. We raised the Wensum Grove issue as well, because it's very similar. It was a very constructive meeting. They went away scratching their heads as to the balls in their court. As such, we made our position very clear. But what was both agreed or recognised by both parties was that when Kings Reach went through planning and technical approval, was quite a considerable time ago. So Maunder Avenue, for instance, I think was 2013, 2014, so quite a while ago. Both parties, or both sides of the fence, recognise that vast improvements have been made with regards to highways technical approval and design and consistency in later or current standards that we're working to. So Kings Reach has been a very painful process with regards to that, and a lot of these things that still crop up on a regular basis, hence the one that I think came up today or yesterday, or I think it was today at Taverner Drive, is a prime example of that. We are dealing with some legacy things from 6 or 7 years ago that if we were to do it now, they shouldn't come up. Stuff always falls through the gap, but not as a regular occurrence that these have. So yeah, it's a bitter pill to swallow with Kings Reach, and we're trying to look at it holistically with the consortium to work out what can be done pre-adoption and potentially what needs to be done post-adoption, because rightly so, the consortium have built to what was on the technically approved drawings. Now, we wouldn't technically approve them here and now, but they were back in the day. So there's a bit of trying to work collaboratively with them and get them to deal with some stuff and appreciate that we're going to have to sort some stuff out when it gets adopted. So yeah, it's a bit of a tricky one.
Thanks. Well, I know we've spoken about this before, so Hazel, go ahead.
No, Paul. I noticed when you were reading out about your annual plan that you actually didn't mention anything about the cycleways on the London Road in Biggleswade. I'm hoping that means that it's not going to go ahead. But there's an awful lot of local opposition to it. I mean, to have them in the road as they are now is dangerous, particularly if there's parked cars on the other side of the road. Cars coming from different directions can't actually pass each other. And we do get a lot of heavy traffic there. So is the alternative to put the footpaths up on the grass verge, or have you decided that it's just too hazardous to even contemplate, hopefully?
No, apologies for that, Hazel. I did mention it, but it was right at the top of my list, basically, that said that the consultation for London Road Active Travel Fund has finished. So
I didn't realise it was an active travel fund.
That's how it was funded by the DFT. So as part of the COVID lockdown, the DFT gave some money to authorities to create active travel fund, or basically it was the active travel fund. So that was put in under the DFT's sort of insistence to do stuff quickly under COVID. We appreciate that it wasn't the ideal solution, but it was sort of, right, here's some money, let's trial something. It did have a lot of negative feedback. There was some positive, but I would say the negative outweighed the positive.
There was an awful lot of nearly nasty accidents there.
Yeah, and not discounting those, I think there's always that subjective view of people's opinion as to things are dangerous as they are or not. So we try and work on the data that says yes or no, but near misses and sometimes not reported. So we appreciate that. However, we knew that it wasn't the final solution. So as a result of that, consultation has gone out and it went out, and I can't remember exactly the closing date, but that has closed. So that will be brought back into defining what a suitable permanent solution would look like. Now, I still envisage, even though the public consultation's finished, that the members around here would probably have a vested interest to see what the concept design for the permanent solution would look like. That is, I believe, still sitting with Steve Laking and Paul Salmon. They'll probably be the leads on those two. So I can take that away and find out the exact timeline and the process without
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Mark.
Thank you. Yeah, so from memory, the consultation that recently finished was around the proposal to narrow the road and to take space from the road for a permanent cycleway, which also seems quite controversial. And there didn't appear to be any consultation around the alternative option, which is to use some of the verge. Can you comment on that at all, please?
I unfortunately, Mark, I can't, because it doesn't sit in my area as such. I will take that away and get some feedback as to the consultation is there. I think Hayley mentioned it earlier that we can get into a position where we're over consulting on everything under the sun and we get negative feedback. It wasn't a consultation as it being this is the final one. It was a consultation to get, in a sense, feedback as to what was good, what was bad, with a potential other option. It's not a case of that will go into detailed design. It's very much to get probably the negative feedback to work out why it was not perceived to be a good solution as it stands, and therefore what the ideal solution was. And what we didn't want to do, and I not wanting to put words in people's mouths in a sense, is sort of say, well, this is what we've currently got, what's good, bad, and what do you think? And then open up sort of Pandora's boxes to every option. It's sort of putting another option on the table saying, well, how would this work? And then working out where the good and the bad is of the current one, the good or the bad of an alternative option is, and then refining it to get probably the best of the situation that we can achieve down that road.
Okay, thank you.
Hayley.
Oh, I was just going to say, can I just come in there? So I asked the same question, Councillor Knight, and we had lots of discussions. I think some of the members here were in those discussions about the roads and why we weren't taking some of the verge or considering taking some of the verge. The issue is, if you start taking the verge, it impacts on the trees and the tree roots, and we've all seen the problems that's caused on the market square. And if you start cutting into those tree roots, you start to affect the lifespan of those trees. So I think there was not necessarily an absolute decision to stay away from doing it that way, but definitely it would open up another can of worms. I think if we didn't have to go that route, I think that might be an advantage. But I think the other thing to say as well is to look at the fact that consultation was not just about London Road. That consultation was actually a whole transport study, and was saying to people, how do you like to move around the town? So I think I would definitely bear that in mind. There's a lot of fantastic data there. For the neighbourhood plan, it would be fantastic because it gives a lot of information about where people and how people want to move around the town and what additional cycle paths people want to see, for example. So I think it's a wealth of information that at the moment is kind of sitting there and no one's really doing anything with it. So I know it's fairly fresh, but I think we really ought to be delving into that in a bit more detail as well.
Thank you, Hayley. Ian?
The whole point about the active travel fund, it was split into two phases, phase one, phase two. And the first phase was basically a lot of temporary stuff, basically to encourage people to walk and cycle due to COVID. The phase two money, which is a larger pot of money, is for permanent solutions rather than temporary stuff, which will obviously have to be designed properly and has a lot more scrutiny behind it. That's why some of these other projects are coming forward.
Madeline?
Can I say, first of all, that we've done a lot of talking about consultation today, but I think there are two things that are being conflated here. One is public consultation or public engagement, and the other is a little bit more information flowing between the Town Council and Central Bedfordshire. So I think we certainly need more of that information flowing between what's being developed at Central Bedfordshire and what's being, you know, and the town council, because some of this just isn't getting through, and we alluded to that earlier. But going back to what Paul's been reporting on, a few weeks ago, I was stopped in the street by a resident who had a real moan about the Rose Lane lights. And 2 days later, they were replaced. So, Paul, you have really helped my kudos with that particular person in the town. Thank you very much. I had no idea they were about to be replaced. But being serious, Lawrence Road, could you just go back over what's happening with Lawrence Road? Because I do have to write to somebody about that.
Yeah, so just looking at it, apologies because the annual plan is quite a high level document. It doesn't have the data. There is some persistent flooding in part of Lawrence Road. The gullies have been on the vulnerable gully list for a while. And then there's some also obviously parking issues down Lawrence Road, and some junction improvements, including a new crossing. So those two elements are all being combined into one. And then depending on what they look like and the extent, then we would try, subject to budgets, to look at the surfacing as well, because what we don't want to do is do junction improvements or put yellow lines down, for instance, or a new crossing, and the surfacing not be applicable and it's going to last 2 years, because we know that the surfacing down Lawrence Road is not great. So it will be doing those two because they're the drivers, and then incorporating some other elements in it later.
So the gullies are going ahead as a separate exercise, are they?
The gullies will be incorporated with the junction improvement and the double yellow lines. What we may do is include and widen the scope to include some maintenance to the actual carriageway surface in addition to those two elements of work.
But then there's the bigger problem with the parking, and there was talk about whether Lawrence Road would be made one way. So how's that developing? Is that a scheme that's being worked up at the moment?
That I cannot see at this point in time. Again, that, because apologies, that doesn't sit with my department. That's Paul Salmon and Lisa Ryan. I know, looking at two hands gone up, they have had engagement with Lisa, because I know Lisa was out on site not that long ago. So they may have more update than myself.
Okay.
Okay, Ian, go first then.
Well, actually, the same day I met you, Paul, I had a meeting with Lisa regarding this. And the plan is actually to reverse, so it's a one-way street actually for the majority of Lawrence Road. But going back to what Madeline asked about this drainage issue, which was raised by Des Ball, I touched base with Nico yesterday, and this has been a long-standing problem. Apparently, the issue is the gully leads into a soakaway, and they're going to clean this out again. But if it isn't a proper solution, they're thinking of putting an additional soakaway and linking them together and see if that fixes it. But as long as it's cleaned out, apparently it works. But the idea is to try and see if they can come up with a better solution for a long-term solution. But it's not linked in with the other projects of the one-way. It's going to happen independently beforehand.
I guess we should wait for the formal. I hesitate to use the word consultation again, but before that is fully considered, so that we've got all the options available. So, what I guess you use the word planning, and I guess it's an option now that's being considered. Okay.
Can I just come in and just with a little bit more on that? So just to say, the idea is one-way operation will start at Havelock Road for vehicles to travel in the direction of Crab Lane. And it's a hope that might discourage some commuters because it will make it more difficult. And it will remain two-way at the Crab Lane end to maintain access to the health centre and ambulance station. And then it will mean they won't need to put double yellow lines at the bend. So the idea is that it will go to outline design in Q2 with a view to consult in the autumn. So I'm assuming that the gullies work will come forward separate and possibly earlier than that. But that's the plan for the one way, at least, is that it's going to be towards the end of this year.
Thank you. Peter.
I was waiting for the conversation to finish, but on a totally separate subject, can I just say a thank you, please, to Lorraine Howitt of the assets team, Central Beds asset team, who's helped us enormously in influencing the repair of our allotment road. So just to thank you for the actual joint working is a good example of it actually working. So thank you to Lorraine Howard. Thank you.
Okay, Peter, thank you for that. And I think it's probably a good time to I guess conclude the discussions around highways, because we've got a couple of other items on the agenda. If that's okay with others, we have community and stakeholder engagement, and it's remiss of me, I'm not absolutely clear in my own head who's actually delivering this update. I think it might be Sarah, but I'm not absolutely sure.
I think it was the town council were going to update on the stakeholder forum. I think it was mentioned at the end of the previous meeting about a stakeholder forum being in place, and to bring that to the joint committee to see if it was, you know, how helpful it could be. And I think in the light of the discussion and the frequent and it's really heartening to me as an engagement manager, but the reference to stakeholder engagement and participation and consultation, I think it would really add value to the joint committee to have this as an item on the agenda, and we can perhaps get an update of what the consultations are, what are planned, etc., that impact on Biggleswade, and try and sort of bring that together in some way. So I don't know if Peter, I was hoping Peter would be able to give an update on the stakeholder forum.
You're on mute, Peter. You're on mute, Peter.
Okay, I'm unmuted. So around about 3 months ago, we initiated a community engagement group. Conscious of that's an engagement group that I've had where in councils that I worked at before. We had detailed conversations with a number of stakeholders about who might best attend that group, both from a resident perspective and also from an employer perspective. And we got some suggestions about the makeup of that group and how it should be properly representative of everybody within the community. The agendas are put together both by the town council and by the residents, and they make recommendations as to what they want to hear more about. We look to meet every second week, and we also have some member representation. The chairmanship of the meeting is either myself or, in this particular case, Cliff, who you may know, is now co-chair of that group. So for instance, you know, we will, when we're out for consultation about the neighbourhood plan, we will share with them the process, we will share with them the survey monkey, we will ask them whether or not our communication is effective, does it make sense, how would they respond if they received it. Another good example is Biggleswade is about to go live with its new website, which is significantly different to what we had before. We got people to test the site, go on there, tell us if it works, how might we organize it in a different way, are our comms effective, etc., etc. So it's a regular conversation that takes place with the community. We try to capture their voices, and we want them to feel and to recognize that they have a voice about how we operationally run the town council, but also a voice about how, for instance, we frame our corporate objectives going forward. And we've started a conversation equally about our corporate objectives. So it's nothing. I don't think it's anything new than what any other council would do, but it's kind of new to Biggleswade, and we're very, very keen to reach out to that audience, and importantly to listen to them and adapt accordingly.
Okay. Thank you. Any comments, any feedback on that? Any other questions on the stakeholder forum? No? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Peter. So the next item, Sarah, is community grants. Over to you, please. You're muted, Sarah.
So sorry. I was just going to update the committee on the timescales for our grant scheme. So the ward councillor grant scheme, which you all know about, is open. So council agreed a new round of funding for this year. We've already received actually quite a few and processed quite a few applications already this year, so that's good news. please, I have a ready-made presentation around all of our grants, which I'd be delighted to share at the stakeholder forum, so community groups can have an update on those schemes. The second one is the more substantive community asset grant scheme. We'll be launching a third round of the scheme on the Thursday, the 29th of April, and closing it, I think it's the 9th of July. During that time, we'll organise a briefing so that groups that are interested but perhaps want a bit more coaching through the application form can join the briefing, and we'll sort of talk them through it in terms of the scoring system and the sort of information required. We haven't set a date yet, but as soon as we do, it'll be publicised. And then the third grant scheme that's very relevant to Biggleswade is the Langford and Biggleswade Wind Farm grant scheme. We've had the new allocation in February, so there is a substantive amount of money available for groups in Langford and Biggleswade for activities in Langford and Biggleswade. So a very useful fund for this area. But as I say, I'd be delighted to update the stakeholder forum on those grant schemes if that would be helpful. I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions, members? We have no questions for you, Sarah, by the sound of it. I don't think it's not that we're not interested. I think we covered a couple of things on the previous meeting, didn't we, in relation to grants. So, but it'd be certainly good to get an update of what the money was spent on. I think what the money was granted. So, but perhaps if we could come back to that at the next meeting, I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah, certainly. I was also going to ask, if I may, the agenda looks slightly different this time, and it's a sort of a bit of a trial and a bit of a pilot, and I wondered what the feedback was on the style of the agenda. It seemed to reflect the interests of this particular committee, and I do apologise, Councillor Russell, for the terminology. Absolutely apologise. You are the vice chairman. So I do apologise, but hopefully if Peter can update in the future, then it won't be necessary, like in those terms. So I do apologise, but I'd be really interested to know whether the agenda suits you or not, or whether the older format is preferable.
Go ahead,
very nice.
I don't know about the format of the agenda, but I note that we have no matters arising from the minutes, so we can't carry things forward. And we don't have our programme of work. Now, I'm not quite sure I understand what Mark read out at the beginning, but I hope it doesn't mean that our agenda is being taken completely out of our hands as a committee. Because, we do really need the ability to put our work programme together. I mean, one of the things that's so important for Biggleswade, and there was more correspondence to me and other councillors yesterday, is about the health situation, GPs, lack of access to GPs, what's happening with the health hub. That's not been discussed at joint committee for a time or two. So I think we do need to have a look at our work schedule, even if we don't do much with it at the odd meeting. I think it needs to be there. And I think it is useful to have matters arising, and that might sometimes lead to items on a future agenda as well. So it's those two things that were really missing for me. Thank you.
I'd agree with you on that, Madeline. Actually, there's a bit an oversight on my part around your attendance and etc. I'm well aware of that as well, and I saw it and then didn't make reference to Sarah. But I agree with her around the plan, at least having some things we're talking about. So, but I think the format of the agenda works well, subject to those the matter arising bits. I think it works well for me. What do others think? Certainly, we're on the back of the fact that we've regularly had the update from Paul and from Grid and from yourself. Those seem to work well for us. And obviously, I know we've got Mark with us this afternoon as well. So I think broadly this format works, subject to those couple of things for me.
Okay. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, thank you.
Any other comments, or are we happy to move on? Thank you very much, Sarah. I do appreciate that. In which case, Mark, we now have an update on the emergency response preparedness. Hi, Mark. Or Sarah, as you're labelled currently.
Oh, that's strange. Oh, yeah.
It's a shared link, to be honest.
I shared my link with you, Mark, so you've come up as me. I do apologise.
Okay. Well, I was invited to come here on, I think, at the last meeting, but I wasn't actually clear on what exactly you wanted. So I have prepared a basic generic presentation on emergency planning, like an induction type thing, which I can run through. Or if you wanted just to do questions and answers, I don't know how you want to do this.
If you can do a sort of top line presentation for us, and I think members will have some questions, Mark, and that would be really helpful. So a combination of the two would be useful. So I guess not War and Peace, but enough to give us a flavour of where we're at.
Yeah, you can stop me at any time and ask questions, or if I'm overrunning or anything, just let me know, please. Okay.
Okay.
I'll try and share my screen now.
Thank you.
Okay, can everybody see that?
Not yet.
No. Open system preferences. Sorry, I haven't used Zoom before, so it's asking me to open some preferences.
Mark, if you want to ping it over to me, I think I can share the screen.
Okay, give me 1 second.
I haven't shared your screen before. You just need to give Zoom permission normally.
Yeah, it's looking like I need to give permission on.
Once you've done that, it should work.
Oh no. I'll send it to you. So it's saying until I quit, it won't let me share my screen.
If you're on a Mac, you can ignore that. It will work. But if it's easier to remail it, please do.
I'll try.
We're here. We're there.
It does work. There you go.
Okay. Which screen can you see? Is it the presentation?
You've got the presentation, but you also got your slides on view as well. So if you set it as a full slideshow, Mark, it should then run if you can. So you're seeing. I think we're seeing your full screen. So run it as a presentation, and then that's it. Bingo.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great. Apologies for that. Not with you MS Teams normally, and I didn't realise Zoom had to do that. So this is just a quick run through emergency planning. Feel free to stop me at any time and ask questions. But the first thing I always ask is, when we talk about an emergency, what are we actually talking about? Because an emergency can be a lot of different things to different people. So when we talk about an emergency, has anyone got any examples of the type of thing what emergency planning deals with? Anyone let me know anything?
Flooding is one of our favourites.
Flooding, yeah, that's a good favourite, especially around Biggleswade. Anything else of the scenarios?
Accidents closing roads, or a fire somewhere closing a road and lots of diversions needed to be put in place and all that.
Okay, so yeah, large scale fires, industrial accidents, that type of thing. Any other ideas?
Turn off of major utilities.
Utility failures, yes, that's a big one, and we had plenty of them in central Bedfordshire.
Global pandemic.
Oh yes, so a pandemic, yes. Aha, nice, a nice sneeze there. So COVID, yes, of course. This rail accidents and things like that. Anyone remember this one? Anyone know what it is? Bunsfield, well done. So Bunsfield, large explosion in an aviation fuel storage facility. This one?
7/7, isn't it? Bombings.
7/7. So terrorism related incidents as well. We cover in emergency planning. And obviously our favourite, flooding. extra points for guessing which cathedral that one is.
Ely?
Nearly, it's Tewkesbury in Gloucestershire. Floods like that quite often. So it's a good place to go to evacuate to, because it never actually floods itself. So that's the type of thing we're talking about when it's an emergency. And there's actually a legal definition in terms of emergency planning, and this is what it is here. So it's an event or situation that threatens serious damage to either human welfare, the environment, or war or terrorism, threatening serious damage to the UK. And that's the official definition. And when we're considering activating our plans, we have to look at that to see if it meets that criteria. But actually, in reality, what it means for Central Bedfordshire Council and the rest of the response is if we have to activate one of our emergency response plans, because it can't be dealt with as a business as usual incident, and it needs more of a coordinated response. That's how we look at what an emergency is as such. And where this comes from is something called the Civil Contingencies Act, which came about in 2004, and it sets out duties on a number of organisations, commonly known as Category 1 and 2 responders. So if you can give me a guess, who are the Category 1 responders? Anyone?
A police ambulance.
Police, fire, ambulance, emergency services, and local authorities, and health organisations. Not all health, because health's quite complex, but most health organisations as well. In Category 2 responders, any ideas? Give you a clue. Lights.
Utilities.
Utility companies, and a whole raft of others as well. It doesn't mean Category 1 or 2 is more important. It means they have some different duties placed on them. But the general duties for all of us is to assess the risk of an emergency occurring, which is using that definition and looking at all the different scenarios to do a risk assessment. We have to put in place emergency plans to deal with this. We are required to do business continuity management. Anybody know what that means? Can anyone give a good definition? No, it's a horrible word, really. It just means to be able to continue the essential parts of your service in an emergency. So a really good challenge for all of us has been COVID, because we've had to change the way we work significantly to be able to continue the services that are critical to people. So that's business continuity. We have to warning and inform the public, either before, during, and after an event. We also have to share information and cooperate with other responders and provide advice and assistance to businesses and the voluntary sector on emergencies. So they're the key duties placed on us as Central Bedfordshire Council, a Category 1 responder. You'll note that town and parish councils are not included as a responder as such, a Category 1 responder or anything like that, or neither is the voluntary sector. There's a few other bits of legislation as well which are important for us. One is called COMA, which is called Control of Major Accidents and Hazards. And that basically deals with sites that store dangerous goods and materials. And these two levels is upper tier sites and lower tier sites. The difference is the amount of dangerous stuff they store. And they're classified into them different groups. And luckily, in Central Bedfordshire, we no longer have any upper tier sites. I will show you the sites we do have just after this. Pipelines, so we have a lot of pipelines running under the ground. All the high pressure ones we need to have a plan for in case something goes wrong, leaking, exploding, etc. And then radiation, which is mainly for those areas that have a nuclear power station, but it also covers transport of goods, which we do have coming through the A1, M1 and on the railway network. So they're all the bits of legislation we work to, and the coma sites that we have are all on here. So the closest one for Biggleswade would be this one here. Anyone know which one that one is? So that's at Sandy Petroleum Storage Depot. It's like Bunsfield, but all the tanks are underground here. You can see on the picture, the tanks are underground, stores aviation fuel. That was an upper tier site since, I know, for about 15 years. 2 years ago, it turned to lower tier because they've decommissioned some of the tanks. So there's less things being stored there now. So that's the closest to Biggleswade, which you can almost see and walk to from some of the paths. On the A1, there's Frontier Agriculture, which is just up from Sandy as well, which stores dangerous agricultural goods. We've got our missile factory at MBDA at Henlow, and in Henlow Industrial Estate, there's a company called Sleagle, which makes inserts for windows, and they have a large quantity of dangerous chemical that's stored on site, which basically, if it gets out, it starts melting stuff. So it's not very nice. But they're all our sites. There is no more currently in central Bedfordshire. In terms of pipelines, this horrible mess here, all these veins of different lines are all our high pressure pipelines running through central Bedfordshire. And you can see that there's a lot. And one of the main ones is a big aviation fuel line, which runs all the way from Scotland, all the way down through underneath Bunsfield, all the way to Heathrow. And that's called the Fena pipeline, owned by Total. The closest pipeline to Biggleswade is a Cadent gas local transmission line, which is high pressure. It runs to the west of Biggleswade. And if this works, no, it's not, so don't worry. I was going to show you it, but where are we? This line here on the presentation, it runs down there and through Langford, but it's just on the outskirts at the other side of the A1, on the other side of the A1, where they're all doing all that development now that I've seen while driving up there. That's a local transmission high pressure gas pipeline that runs down there, but it doesn't pass any residential properties in Biggleswade, which is good news for us. And how you'll see where these pipelines are, you'll see these things on the side of the road or along public footpaths or the side of fields and things. And these are the notifications to say there's a pipeline here, and there's a little pole that tells you how deep it is, what's in there, who owns it, etc. And they're like every kilometre along as you go along. So next time you're driving around Biggleswade and around there, have a look. You'll probably start to see loads of these dotted around everywhere. So one of the other things I talked about, that one of the duties is risk assessment, and we have to produce a risk assessment locally. And they're basically red, amber, yellow and green, the risks. And like any risk assessment, they're looked at in terms of the likelihood of it happening and the impact score. And there is actually a nice national document, the National Risk Register. I don't know if, can you see this screen I'm sharing now?
Yes,
we can, Mark. I think just be mindful of that. I probably try and be focused as much as we can on the Biggleswade stuff, but I appreciate what you're doing here.
Yeah, so the risk register covers, there's about 80 different risks on the risk register for Bedfordshire. There's no site-specific risks as in Biggleswade as such at all. It just covers all the generic risks. And obviously the highest risk that's been the highest risk for the last 10 years is pandemic. and
Right.
now it's actually taking place.
We're in the middle of it, aren't we? So
yeah. So the one we always used to present on is this is the highest risk, and everyone went, yeah, that before never happened, but now we've got it. So the risks cover everything for all the terrorism risks, everything from space weather downwards. So these, and it would have been nice to share some more detail on that, but if we had more time, I could have gone into a lot more detail about
sure.
the different risks.
I think we're probably at a point where we need to wrap, if we may. Just this is some additional key bits that you want to get across to us. I think
Okay.
yeah, questions.
Of course. So we have a local resilience forum, which is the multi-agency response for planning and awareness and training for all things that develop the emergency plans. And what I'd say the role of the town and parish council is in an emergency is to link in with the response as early and as quickly as possible, having at least one 24/7 number that we can reach you on, representing your community, feeding in issues, problems, what needs doing, where resources need to go, providing local knowledge. You've got a flood kit, so helping deploy and do the flood kit, creating your own community emergency plan as well. And what you've currently got is you do have a draft plan in place, which I've been working with Sean on. You have a community flood kit, and you've set up a Biggleswade emergency WhatsApp group. And I say this is probably the best, most efficient way to communicate with your group and with us in the emergency response for Central Bedfordshire Council. I think your group needs extending the membership a bit. There's a lot of people on this meeting that are not members of that group. And yeah, I think that needs to be looked at again to see who wants to be part of that and how you get involved. Finally, there are training sessions that we run every month, the second Tuesday of every month, 7 till 9. Everyone's welcome to come. There's many different subjects covered. Anyone's welcome. If you want to go on the invite list, then the email's there, or just contact me. Okay. Any questions?
Sorry to hurry along, Mark. It wasn't intentional. Hazel.
I just wondered where filling stations and the like come into all of this, because I think they are hazardous, and we do have them around the town, and houses actually built very near to them. So are they considered that much of a hazard?
They are not covered in any of the like the COMA legislation, because they don't store enough petroleum. There's a few sites. There's one in Luton that does have extra storage, and that is classed into the grouping, but the rest don't, and they're managed by the Health and Safety Executive separately. They don't come under like the emergency legislation, but of course, yes, they are important to consider, but not considered a major risk.
Okay, that's reassuring from somebody that's got one at the top of the road. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Doesn't mean they're not a risk. It just means, they're not covered by any emergency legislation as such.
Right, thank you.
Mark, your screen is still sharing. If you don't mind. Perfect. Thank you very much. Any members, any other questions that we have for Mark on emergency planning? No, we don't. Thank you very much then for joining us, and members, thank you obviously for joining the meeting as well. I have nothing else to add, so on that basis we will conclude the meeting. Thank you very much.